Well, here we are, Season 3. For those with drive, the Standard H podcast is a conversation about the lives of entrepreneurs and those who've been instrumental in growing companies. Season 3 will actually host episodes every other week, a change in what has historically been a weekly podcast. The reason is due to the pre-recorded nature of my schedule, and since we will all be home for the foreseeable future, I wanted to attempt to have these extend for a longer period of time than we will be socially distancing ourselves. Fingers crossed we get back to normal sooner than later, of course. Given the current climate, I wanted to start the season with someone who often offers such levity by way of his lightning-quick wit and his overall happy-go-lucky energy he's exuded via his social media platforms. Of course, I'm talking about Phil Toledano, or as you may know him on the socials as Mr. Enthusiast. Phil is a New York City-based artist who is an avid car and watch collector. Contrary to his personality, his conceptual art regularly takes a dive into some fairly dark exploratory realms. We discuss the ins and outs of a particular project of his called Maybe, which also inspired a documentary called The Many Sad Fates of Mr. Toledano. We get into some pretty deep dives of car talk and most certainly watch talk. It was a truly inspiring and a fun conversation to be a part of, and I hope you all agree. I actually did something different for this one. Prior to truly beginning each episode, I get levels from each guest so the audio sounds okay. I left in our lead-in conversation only to give you a glimpse into what it's like to hang out with Phil and to display what a crack-up he truly is. You'll see what I mean. I'm your host, Wesley Smith, and you're listening to the Standard H podcast.
I miss sitting in the passenger seat. When you're
Have you ever sat in the passenger seat of your own car with somebody else driving it?
My wife doesn't drive.
It's the weirdest thing.
Yeah, no, it's super weird. But my wife doesn't drive, so I always say I should just wear like a little cap and open the door and the whole thing. She's just sit in the back, get it over with. Yeah,
That's brilliant. Your last name, is it Toledano?
Toledano. Yeah.
That's what I figured.
Tolly.
Tolly?
That's what my nickname at school.
No way.
Yeah. That was my father's nickname when he played basketball for Yale in 1928.
What?
Yes.
Your dad went to Yale?
Yeah.
Was your dad born in the States?
Yeah, 1910, New York.
Oh, but you were born in the UK, right?
What? What are you talking about?
Weren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, London, right?
I did a semester abroad. That's how I got the accent.
What are you, Madonna?
Yeah, exactly.
You go for 6 months and come back. I was raised here.
Yeah, I love that. Madonna just came back full English accent.
100%.
It was great.
Yeah, that's really crazy.
Yeah, that's what I did.
Well, Phil, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
We've officially begun.
Oh, thank you.
I can't wait for this because this is just going to be fun. We talked about you recently being on the Hodinky podcast. We'll get to other stuff, Hodinky related and watch related. So you were born in London.
Yep.
Right. But your dad's from New York.
Yeah, he was from New York.
What took him to England?
He after the war, he worked for U.S. Steel.
Okay.
And he ended up, actually I've had the most amazing story about that ever in history of storytelling.
Well, let's debut this on the Standard Age podcast.
So in the 50s, U.S. Steel was like Google.
Okay.
Or Microsoft was.
Monumental company.
It was just the biggest. And also you have to imagine that America was at the peak of its powers. Post-Second World War, America was the world's superhero.
Right.
Not quite the same as it is now. But
we don't need to go there.
We don't have to discuss. That's a whole other podcast.
Yeah.
So my mom told me the story of my father needed a job. And so one day he woke up and he told my mom, I'm going to see the president of U.S. Steel. And so it's like saying, you know what, I'm just going to drop in. I'm going to see Bill Gates. I'm just going to make an appointment to see Bill Gates.
Casually.
Yeah, casually. So he goes over there, and he's a pretty handsome, charming guy, and he talks his way up to the president's office, and he finally gets to see the president's secretary, and he says, I'd like to see the president. She goes, well, do you have an appointment? And he goes, no, but I have some things I think he'd like to hear, because he's just got the world's largest balls. So
that's like saying, I don't have an appointment, but I should have.
yeah, that's
like
exactly,
he should have had one for me.
They should have known.
Right.
They should have known about my father and made an appointment, reached out to him.
Trust me, he wants to see
Yeah,
me.
that was basically the gist of what he's saying. So the woman goes, okay, well, you could just wait. So he sits there all day. Finally, the door opens. He goes, okay, you've got 5 minutes. And he goes in there and gets a job.
No way.
And that's the story. Well, that was my dad. Like, he was just, every door was there to be opened. You know, there was no reason to consider the possibility of no.
Did that ever influence you, positive, negative? Did you look at that as like a superhero characteristic?
Yeah.
Or did you look at it as like, I could never do that?
No,
or,
I thought that was...
Or it's like, oh, this is just how it goes.
That's how it goes.
Unbelievable.
Well, because I grew up with the idea of why not,
right?
And America, particularly New York, was always the place of why not. Whereas growing up in England in the 70s and 80s, it was a place of why. You know, why would you do that?
Right.
You know,
right.
And Europe is still a little bit like that.
Well, and then in the English tradition, it's sort of self-deprecating, but also like not shy, but you know what I mean? Like,
well, you
can't be ostentatious.
Well, you don't want to be visibly seen to be advancing yourself.
Right.
Whereas in America, I mean,
that's the why not.
Yeah, I remember when I worked in advertising, there used to be this guy I worked with, and he would always present these ideas, but they were always kind of, I was on the creative side, and they were always kind of, they weren't the best ideas, but he presented them with such conviction and gusto. I just watched people around me go, yeah, you know, this shitty idea is actually pretty good. And it was fascinating to see that.
Oh, wow.
Whereas I would start off, well, I've got this thought, I'm not sure if it's any good, but you know, because that's the way you grew up in England. And after a while, I realized you can't really present ideas that way.
Right. So where'd you
end
end
up?
up?
Really think that.
Where'd you end up at university?
I went to Tufts in Boston.
And you studied
English literature, which is super useful.
No, after your dad was with U.S. Steel, he became an artist. No.
Well, yeah, because I was born. They moved to England in the early '60s. And I was born in 68, and my dad was 58 when I was born.
Wow.
So when I was actually doing the numbers the other day, I was 12 and he was 70.
Right.
Which is crazy, but it's interesting because he never seemed, he was always super healthy, super fit. He was always eating, you know, bran and brown toast and all this kind of stuff that no one was eating in the 70s or 80s. And he would swim all the time. So he was really fit. He didn't look like a guy who was 70, didn't act like a guy who was 70. And he was an artist.
What did he do primarily, medium-wise?
A lot of things, which actually I ended up being like that. He did sculpture, painting, oils, carpets. He had carpets made. He designed carpets. He did everything, really.
Nice. So what made you go into English Lit then rather than studying, say, like fine art?
Because, well, it was really the only thing I was any good at.
Really?
Is the short answer.
Okay.
No, I mean, I was pretty good at art, but my parents didn't want me to go to school for it.
Huh.
Well, I totally get that because my father, they had made their money and they had retired and now he was living as an artist, but he knew that being an artist was a really hard thing to do and it was a tough job to have.
Right.
So I think
well,
they would...
starving artist exists for a reason.
Well,
right?
that's right. The cliche is there for a reason, like you say. So that's why they were protecting me, which is what parents do.
Right.
You know,
right.
I didn't do that much good in the end, but initially...
Why not?
Right. I mean, that's what you do.
Existing. So
like my kid asked me about that now. Lulu says, you know, what's it like being an artist? Maybe I should be an artist. And I think, well, I mean, you could, but it's not easy.
Right.
Which is actually not the thing to say to her.
Well, how old is she?
She's 10.
Why do you say that's something you shouldn't say?
Well...
Because you don't want to feel as though you're discouraging her?
Yeah, I don't want to do what my parents did, even though they did it out of love and what they thought was in my best interests.
Well, if you can bring out the inner rebellion, tell them what not to do.
That's right.
It's the reverse psychology.
That's right. You know what? You shouldn't do that. I encourage you to be an accountant.
Yeah, of course. Oh,
yeah.
gosh. Yeah, numbers.
A standard
Excel
chartered
sheets.
accountant.
Yes.
That's right. I show us Excel sheets all the time. She loves them. She's really into it.
She's just a fan of green. Like that's it.
I'd read her from Excel sheets
Right.
before to go to bed.
So what was the first job out of school then? For you, I mean, Lulu's not working yet.
Sadly. I keep trying to put her to work. I moved to Paris after Tufts, and this is how weird my thinking is. I thought I really wanted to start working. I wasn't that interested in school, but I always felt like once I was out in the world, I would just get going, and I really wanted to get going. So I got a job at an accounting software company.
Speaking of
checking
Excel.
checking for bugs, a French accounting software company. And it was funny because I had been offered a job as an intern, and I thought, you know what, this is everything I feel I hate. But maybe secretly I don't hate it, and I should just try it and see if I actually turn out to be genius at it. But as it turned out, I was completely right. I really loathed it. I had to sort of teach myself accounting in French, and then I was the guy who just checked all this software.
And then growing up in England, I'm assuming you took some French.
Well, my mum was French Moroccan.
Oh,
so I grew up in London and Casablanca.
So did you
I grew up speaking French?
Speaking French,
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
So the French part was not a problem. The accounting software thing was a bit of a problem. And then it was so miserable that I kind of developed this psychosomatic tropical bowel disorder, where I would go to the bathroom 3 or 4 times a day, and I'd put a roll of toilet paper behind my head as a pillow, and I have this like 10-minute nap because I was so miserable. I had to go to sleep for 10 minutes just because it was so unpleasant. And then I thought, okay, maybe that's a sign I shouldn't be doing this.
Right.
Then I got another job at another software company that was 3D rendering software. You rendered textile designs on top of photographs so people could see what the textile design looked like on a person.
Oh, interesting.
And I went to Frankfurt for a trade show, and all it would and the software was super buggy. But my orders were, whenever the system crashed, it was my fault. So I spent like a week in Germany telling Germans that I was an idiot. Because the software would crash, I go, it's totally my fault. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. And I just spent a whole week telling everyone what a buffoon I was.
Well, given that you're not German, I'm sure they would be happy to tell you that anyway.
Well, yeah, there is that. But so there was that. And then finally I said, okay, you know what? I'm just going to try and be a photographer.
Oh, right. Okay.
So I started doing fashion photography.
But why photography?
Because I had always taken pictures ever since I was 10 or 11.
What was your first camera?
I had to do a presentation to my parents on why they should get me a camera. I still have the notes somewhere. I found the notes, a little notebook about why I should be a photographer.
Really?
Yeah. So I did this presentation.
So you're one part creative, one part salesperson.
Oh, totally. Yeah, basically. So I remember it cost £50, which was a lot of money for me at the time. So that's what I was doing in Paris for about a year. And then I spoke to I remember talking to my cousin going, I'm not sure about this whole photography thing. And he said, why don't you get into advertising in New York? And I said, okay.
That was my next question. So it was your friend that referred you to getting into advertising?
Well, my cousin, yeah, he said
yeah.
He said, I think you'd like it. So I thought I would. And I started reading about it. Oh, this seems interesting. It's like a job, but not a job if you're on the creative side.
Right. Yeah.
So I moved to New York, and then I called all my parents' friends because they used to live in New York. And I said, it's Philip, so-and-so's son. I'm in town. I'm wondering if you might know anyone in advertising that I could go and see. And then someone knew someone, so I went to see them, and I got a job.
That's really smart.
Well, it was just
networking.
It just seemed like the only. What else was I going to do?
Yeah.
I didn't know anyone else to do it. So anyway.
Yeah, because at the time this is pre-Google, right? So you couldn't just Google advertising. You know what I mean?
Pre-Google.
And look up. Yeah.
Yeah, it was pre-everything.
It was. Yeah. That's really interesting.
So I got a job as assistant to the chairman, actually, of this pretty big agency. And then he sort of shuffled me off to assistant to the head of new business.
And so you've been living in the city ever since?
Yeah.
Okay. That's really interesting. So then what were some of your clients? Who did you shoot for?
Well, I wasn't taking pictures.
Oh.
I was just
You were just the assistant?
Yeah, I was as the new
clerical work.
Yeah, I was calling up. I spent a lot of my time calling up companies asking who the head of marketing was, and then I worked with the head of the new business department to brainstorm a thing to send out to people, like a shtick, like a So we had this like toy robot that I wrote a script for that we would send out to all these head of marketing, and then he'd send the toy robot with this like recorded thing, and then he would then call them up and go, hey, we should work together, blah blah blah, let's set up a meeting. So I was the guy finding the addresses of all these people and making endless photocopies and all that stuff. But then on the side, because I wanted to be an art director,
right?
So I taught myself design, and I taught myself to use the computer. We were using Next computers. Do you remember what that was?
Well, that was Steve Jobs' follow-up.
That was Steve Jobs. So I was teaching myself on Next computers, which no one in the world was using.
I'd never had one. My dad worked for IBM back in the day.
Oh yeah?
And so we, of course, had a PC Junior, in the house, playing Jumpman or whatever the game was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I then I put a portfolio together. And then I would go up and in my spare time, I'd go up and see the creative director on the fourth floor, and I just sort of harangue him. I go, "Do you think? What about giving me a chance? What about giving me a chance?" I just stalked him.
Right.
I sit outside his office crying.
So you were just persistent. He
He didn't have a choice. I was charmingly persistent. That's the key.
That's amazing.
That's the key. I just harangued him endlessly, and eventually said, "All right, fine." After a year, they made me a junior art director.
That's cool. And so you rose through the ranks and became creative director at some point. What?
From that, oh yeah, I got canned. After about a year of working.
You're not who you said you were.
Wait a minute. I've got fired on a fairly regular basis, actually.
Really?
Yeah, well, when I work...
Was that an interpersonal thing, or was it work-related?
It's the Tourette's. It was the rage. It was the rage.
It was the toilet paper breaks.
Yeah,
with
the
naps.
snoozing.
Yeah,
the tropical bowel disorder.
Right.
No, well, what I realized was that I worked really well in small, really creative agencies, and I didn't work well. The bigger the place and the more politics there were, the less able I was to work.
I'm the exact same way.
I was really bad at. I always felt like I just wanted to say what I wanted to say. Why did it have to? I was.
Why do I have to explain why I'm saying what I'm saying?
Or I wasn't saying the right thing at the right time to the right person necessarily. Like I wasn't good at navigating that kind of Byzantine labyrinth of politics. My wife is amazing. Like she's, I'm in the trenches. I hear the whistle. I run over the top. I get peppered by machine gun fire, and I fall into the barbed wire dead. Whereas Carla is in an air balloon way above the trenches, seeing which way to go so you don't get mowed down by the machine gunner.
Wow. What does she do?
She works in advertising.
Oh, you guys met
we
that way?
We met. She worked on the strategic side, and I was on the creative side, and we met in an agency.
Well,
now she runs an agency.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Oh, really cool. So then when did you make the departure out of advertising into art full time?
I had, and I actually recommend this. For a while I had been thinking, God, I really want to be a photographer. And I didn't have the courage. And then I got this job at a really good agency, and it was the worst job of my entire life. I was so utterly miserable. I would come home and I would just sit down and not even switch on the lights and just sit there for like 20 minutes, just staring into space, just reveling, bathing in my misery.
Just decompressing.
Well, I didn't even know what it was. Just, and then, and I was really thankful actually, because it made me realize I don't want to do this anymore. I can't do it anymore. Even though I had a pretty good career in advertising, I was a creative director and I made good money. But I was thankful that it was so terrible. So I always recommend, if people are not sure, if they feel like they want to do something else, they should get a job that makes them totally miserable.
Learn what you absolutely hate so that you never have to do it again.
That's right.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Because otherwise, what happens if you have a medium beige-sized job that makes you comfy and happy?
Right.
Then
it's cruise control.
Then you wake up and you're 53 and you think, well, okay, what just happened?
Yeah.
And I also had this peculiar way of making decisions where I sort of think of myself looking forward and then I look back. I think of myself in the future looking back. So I'll explain. So for instance, I was 35 and I thought, okay, in 10 years time, I know exactly where I'll be if I stay in advertising. I'll be a creative director at a bigger agency. I'll be making $400,000 a year. I'll probably have a house in the Hamptons and I'll be selling, campaigns to clients.
Right.
And I thought, would that make me happy? And the answer was so clear when I thought to myself, in the future, considering that.
Right. That's really interesting perspective. I don't know that I know anybody that looks at life that way.
I always do that. I always think, okay, if I make this decision, will I? And I look back now, and I think even if I've had some degree of success as an artist, but I've had 7 books published, and even if no one ever looks at my work again, that's, for me, I've had 7 books of work that really matters to me that someone else published and put out into the world, and for me, that's everything.
That's
so
incredible.
Even if it didn't work out, even if I'm not the most famous artist or even a famous artist, I've done something for myself that mattered.
Was there anything as a creative director in an agency that you were especially proud of?
Well, you know what? Funnily enough, I'm very grateful to advertising, because I didn't go to art school, but advertising was art school.
It was art school, yeah.
And it really taught me so many things that were useful, that are useful now. I think the number one thing is the idea of being brutal with ideas. Because I think what happens when you have ideas, no matter what field you're in, whether you're an artist, an entrepreneur, whatever it is that you've got to be ruthless with whether the thing works or not. And if it doesn't function, or even if a part of it doesn't function, you have to identify that and amputate it. Right. And that's what advertising was like. You had to be ruthless with your ideas, because you had to generate a lot of ideas and then say, okay, this one works. And even if you loved something about the one that kind of didn't work, you had to kill it. Right. And that's really served me in good stead for everything I've done.
Well, I was going to say, like, even through your work, like, I think really one of the more ruthless projects you've done is the Many Sad Fates.
Maybe. The film is called The Many Sad Fates of Mr. Toledano, but the book is called Maybe. The project's called Maybe. Yeah, that was about, after my parents died quite suddenly, I found myself really worrying about, the thing that's interesting about life is that you have no idea of what's in front of you. Like, I remember very clearly exactly how my life was right before the phone call from my father, where he said, something's wrong with your mother. And I had this life, and then suddenly that phone call, it was a right angle. It was a sharp turn, and everything in my life radically changed. And so I got really obsessed with this idea of what other sharp turns does life have in store for me that I can't see. And of course you can't anticipate any of them, because they're unseeable. But then I decided I was going to do a project where I'd try and anticipate all the worst possible things that would happen to me in life.
So go through just a few of those.
I mean, of course, and it is kind of a crazy idea, and the funny thing is, with photography in particular, photography is always about the past. You take a picture and it's behind you. So
it's forever.
It is forever, but it's not so how do you research the future? So I talked to fortune tellers and tarot card readers and numerologists, and I had them. I would ask them, just what terrible things do you see in my future? And then,
and all of them are like, why are you doing this?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Everyone's like, really? And then I took a DNA test that told me what illnesses I might get, and based on all this information, then I worked with a prosthetics expert who kind of made me up. And it took 4 or 5 hours to get into this silicone prosthetics. And so, there was, the thing about it is it's not just things that might go wrong in terms of my physicality, my health. It's things that might go wrong in terms of me, my career, or so.
Like winding up homeless.
Yeah, being homeless, or having a stroke, or committing. One of the people said she saw me committing suicide, which is really great news to hear.
Right.
One where I've had a lot of plastic surgery.
Right.
And so, for instance, the plastic surgery one is about me losing a sense of who I am, like losing a sense of perspective.
Right.
Or me being alone. So I spent 3 years doing that.
So what exactly did you take from that project lesson-wise?
Well, funnily enough, there was no kind of sudden religious, parting of the clouds. I was doing it, and I really hated doing it, because it was just miserable. It was really expensive. It took a lot of planning. I had to cast for actors to play with me. I had to look for locations, styling. Actually, Valeria, Bradley's wife from Autodromo, she starred some of the pictures.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the one of me in a nightclub where I'm kind of got like a mullet, and she starred that picture. It's one of my favorite pictures.
Oh, amazing.
And I suddenly there was a documentary film that was being made of it, and it's actually on the New York Times website, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. That's where I saw it.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
But the director, he every time I would do a shoot, at the end he would say, "So, do you think you're done yet?" And then when he asked me, I said, "I think I'm done." And I didn't realize I was done till he asked me and I said it. And then I realized that I didn't have to do any more. And I realized, and this is probably going to sound a bit odd, but I just felt lighter.
I was going to ask you if there was like any spiritual revelation in that.
I mean, that was it. I guess I just felt lighter. I just felt I realized when he asked me and I answered, and I was surprised by my own answer, I realized that I wasn't worrying about what was to come anymore.
Right. Because you've already seen it.
Well, even
right?
if I've just seen so many iterations of me. Maybe I burnt out that fear in some way. Because funnily enough, you can't. I'm sure there's things that will happen to me that I have no idea what they'll be.
Well, yeah, because I was curious as to like how you balance sort of the energies towards like the results as a release versus a perpetuation.
Well, it's funny you say that, because Carla was very worried. When I started that project, I was not in a good place. And she was really worried that it would send me spiraling into kind of a wormhole of misery.
Right.
And she said to me, "Could you?" I think she says in the film, "Can't you just see a shrink like a normal person instead of doing this whole thing for 3 years?" And she would look. It would have been a lot better and a lot cheaper. That was a risk I took, and it was a really selfish risk to take because I had a wife, I had a kid, but I didn't really know any other way to sort of process those feelings other than to kind of just do it in this way, in my way.
Well, you kind of mentioned two different variations of cost, right? But there's also the monetary cost of something like that, because this podcast is about entrepreneurship,
sure,
as well as just the lives of entrepreneurs, obviously.
Sure.
What does a project like that cost? I don't need to know hard number. Like
it was just it was expensive
to the sense, but like
it was. I mean, each shoot was.
So is it like a normal film when you're producing art in general for your projects? Like, do you seek out funding the way that like movie production seeks funding?
I mean, it's all self-funded.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow. That's incredible.
Well, I think to be an entrepreneur, entrepreneurs share a lot with dictators.
Okay, go on.
In fact, you'll see behind you those sculptures. Those are all me as various dictators.
Right. Yeah.
Because the thing about a dictator and an entrepreneur is you've got to build a world, and you have to fill that world with believers
as you see it.
Yeah, then you've got to be totally delusional. As an artist, you've got to believe that you have ideas that no one else has had before, and not only that, but people are waiting to hear your new ideas. And that's what you do as an entrepreneur. You've got to have the belief that you're doing something new that no one else is doing. And you've also got to kind of ignore what people say to some degree. Like you have to have this fine balance between ignoring, because there's going to be a lot of people say that's not a good idea, or I'm not sure, really. And you have to go, yeah, no, this is the right thing.
Now, is that the only one where you've actually shot a documentary in parallel?
I didn't do the documentary. That was my friend from college.
But that's the only time that's happened when you've created art.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that was the other thing. It was making art in front of a film
friends.
Crew.
Oh, yeah.
It was weird because there's a weirdly performative aspect, although there was already a performative aspect to that work because I'm acting.
So your return on investment comes through the selling of these photos.
That's right.
Whereas his comes from.
Well,
I guess that's a whole
Josh Seftel's the director. He makes really interesting documentaries. So we knew each other in school, and then we ran into each other on the street randomly. And he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm about to start this project." He said, "Oh, hang on a minute. I want to make a documentary about that."
Wow.
And that's kind of how that happened. But he did it in the same way I make my own art, because he thought this will be an interesting enough thing where it will get me attention.
Did you sell those photos as individual photos or as a series? Did you have to buy all of them? How did that go?
You can buy them as individual print. There's prints, and then there's a book, and then there were shows, etc.
Right, the book, sure. Have you used the same publisher for all 7 books?
No, I had different publishers.
Is that because of, I don't know, the economy of that scale or whatever?
No, it just whoever's in. I mean, the last 3 or 4 books was the same publisher. The first book I published was a book called Bankrupt. that's photographs of bankrupt offices and the things that people left behind in them. That was the first project I did, and it was actually when I quit to be a photographer, I synchronized my losing my high-paying job with the implosion of the economy very craftily. I planned it. That was when the tech bubble imploded.
Yeah, was that 02?
Yeah,
yeah,
or 1, something like that.
That's when I graduated college. Let me tell you how great that was to find a job
exactly
coming out of college.
Right. Yeah.
Because I was not an electrical engineer or anything specific.
Right.
I majored in business.
Well, that's a lot more tangible than English lit.
But it's so vague.
Right. That's true.
All right, let's just do business. Like,
I want to make some business.
Yeah, let's just make business.
Right.
What classifies a good photo to you?
I guess, well, the thing is, I wouldn't consider myself a photographer. I should say that now.
Right, sure.
I consider myself...
You're an artist.
Artist with a triple A-H. Well, actually, I say if I want to be a super dick, I say I'm a conceptual artist, because everything for me, whether it's art or anything else, is always around an idea. Like even with watches, the things I'm doing now, they're around an idea. So for me, the thing that matters the most in art, or even in business in a way, is surprise.
Right.
Like you go, oh shit, I can't believe I didn't think of that.
Right.
And I love that feeling. In art, it's an amazing feeling when you see, and it's part joy and enthusiasm, and then part raging jealousy,
disappointment
in myself,
in yourself.
in myself, and just jealousy that the other guy thought of it, and how can I cut his brake lines and get into his will, or her will.
Well, with the likes of social media and the likes of social media, obviously, sorry, that was really lame, but in like engagement being somewhat of a determination of success online.
Sure.
Like, how do you determine your own success? Like, what does that look like?
God, it's funny, the obsession with Instagram. Well, what does that mean?
What does it mean?
What does success mean online?
No, for you, just in general, not online.
Well, I'll tell you what I've realized about success for me.
Yeah.
Is it just generally?
Yeah.
Well, you know what you realize as you get older, which is really irritating, is that all cliches are true.
Right.
It's really annoying.
Right. They exist for a reason.
Yeah. You spend most of your life as a kid going, that's bullshit. This is such a cliche. And then you get old, you go, oh, I guess that's true. So for being successful at the thing you like, it's that dumb. Yeah. It's that dumb. And then
do what you love and you never work a day in your life.
That's right. All those things, that bouillabaisse of cliches, they're all true. But then again, that depends what that means. If you can make a good living, or you can live well, or you can provide for your family, or you can have a happy life, that's, all those super tedious cliches are all totally true.
Well, what's interesting about what you've said so far, like,
is nothing.
Well,
is absolutely nothing.
Nothing of substance. No, zero. The thing is, and I'm putting words in your mouth, there's like a level of masochism, it seems. Only due to the fact that you hated your first job.
Yeah.
You hated the job in Paris. You do these projects that are painful to do.
Well, maybe it was the only one that was painful to do. Generally speaking, I really liked the work I do. Okay. That was painful. Well, after my mum died, I had a real shift in the work I did, and I started doing super, super personal work.
What were you doing before that, just as an example?
Well, oddly enough, it's all. I think that all artists do is personal. It's just a question of how visible they are in the work.
Right.
And so all of a sudden, I became very visible. I did a book about my dad. I did a book about my sister, the death of my sister. I did a book about having a kid. I did a book about myself. So I was really visible in the work. I totally forgot why I'm saying this.
Masochism.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Thank you. Oh, yeah, back to masochism. Well, I am English, so there's a certain masochistic quality to English people. Right. I guess I felt like the maybe thing was the most unpleasant. The other things were not unpleasant. They were just things I felt I had to do. Right. I felt like I had to sort them out. I had to talk about them for myself to make sense of my life.
But not in a destiny kind of way.
No, I mean...
just like a necessity.
Yeah, it was a necessity. I mean, I think... Yeah, I mean, if you're really interested in being an artist, it's always a necessity,
I've always enjoyed creating art and usually tearing it up and throwing it away. But
that's what most artists do. I mean, I do the same thing.
Paintings and such from years ago and things like that. But I've always enjoyed photography. I've always enjoyed architecture, even though I'm not an architect. Sure. I appreciate it. But with like certain creative, I was talking to my wife, I don't know, about a year ago about this. And I was like, I have what I call creative vomit. And like, I can't stop thinking about something until it's created.
That's right.
And then once it's created, it's almost like I don't even think about it anymore.
No, I'm exactly the same way. Yeah. Like I have things that I have to do, and then once they're done, I have no interest really in them.
Well, it's like what you were saying about maybe. There was like a weight lifted almost.
That's
you felt lighter.
That's exactly right.
And that's exactly how I feel.
Yeah.
That's
the idea
really
part is the most exciting part.
Because you're far more successful at art than I am. So,
well, only because I've made an effort.
Just by proxy, I feel great.
I also am available as an aftershave.
Are you a watch collector but having trouble finding something cool and unique? I mean, the last thing you really want is what everyone else has, right? Well, this is where my friend and former Standard H podcast guest Tim Jackson comes in. He and his wife Jana own Passion Fine Jewelry in Solana Beach, California, where you'll find an incredible assortment of independent watches waiting for you in their shop and online. And if you're getting engaged, have an anniversary coming up, or simply have another reason to buy jewelry, they have you covered. Passion Fine Jewelry also employs a goldsmith on staff for any custom desires, so you're able to go that route if you so choose. Visit Passion Fine Jewelry when you find yourself in Southern California, but they're also open 24 hours a day at passionfinejewelry.com. You can also find a wealth of information through Tim's blog, independentintime.com, where he covers anything independent watchmaking related, among a plethora of other information, so check that out as well. I've really enjoyed creating these podcasts on behalf of Standard H and sharing each of these personal stories with all of you. We each have goals, and it's the entrepreneurial spirit that inspired me to start the company. You can further support the brand and the podcast by visiting standard-h.com to pick up your choice of merchandise, and as always, thank you for listening. Lastly, if you have a moment, please rate and review the show. It makes a tremendous difference in keeping these things going. Back to my conversation with Phil. You have a very clean aesthetic the way you dress.
Sure.
In a very timeless sense of style.
And the jumpsuits? Are you going to get to the jumpsuits?
I mean, I wasn't going to bring it up, but the jumpsuits are timeless. Mechanics still wear them, right?
But generations mechanics have worn them.
But where does your style come from? Where do you like to shop?
Well, this will explain a lot about me, and it was a real revelation to me. But I worked for a guy in advertising. This guy was a genius called Andy Berlin. He ran a bunch of really good creative shops, and he just used to come in. He was this big guy, and he used to go, Phil, come into my office. And he had this deep kind of like gravelly voice, and he would just make these kind of pronouncements. And I felt like I sort of offer him a severed goat's head in return because they were kind of prophetic. And he said to me once, he said that I was a pathological contrarian. And when he said that, I thought, shit, he's so right. And there's good aspects of that, and there's bad aspects of that. This is probably a bad aspect, this Patek Philippe.
The watch
21,
on your wrist.
I really love it, but probably 3 other people in the world do. So I'll never be able to sell it. But that goes for fashion, and for everything I do, there's some part of me that is always considering what the whole does, and then wanting to do the opposite. So that's why I tend to go off in peculiar directions with everything, whether it's cars that I collect or watches that I collect or jumpsuits that I happen to wear.
Right.
Although the jumpsuit thing, I will say this. I read this thing.
So that's not a recent development? You've always worn jumpsuits?
For like the last 15 years.
No way.
I used to have them made for me.
Who was making them for
this
you?
This tailor down the street for like $600. And then I went one step too far. I had one made in corduroy, and I looked like a plushie. I came home, and Carla said, maybe not that. Maybe you should not have that one. But the thing, the jumpsuit started because I remember I was reading something about Einstein, and he had 7 suits that were all the same. So he never had to put any cognitive power into what am I going to wear. He just wore the same thing. I thought, that's genius. I will one-up Einstein because that's how genius I am.
With a jumpsuit.
And I'll make a jumpsuit, so I don't have to think about like a thing. It's just one piece you get into. And then that's kind of...
and in corduroy, people can hear you coming, right?
And also you could generate electricity, so it's static. Yeah.
Going back to our early
you
conversation.
You can power a small village just with the static of your thighs brushing together.
Oh my gosh. Well, you mentioned watches. I was going to talk about that later, but let's talk about them now. What was your first watch?
A Speedmaster. But I bought when I got my first real ad job. I got in 95 maybe.
Right. And then you got rid of it?
No, I still have it.
Oh, you do still have
But
that
I never
one.
wear it because I see everyone else wearing them. That's the thing for me. Is like the moment no, but they're beautiful. That's the thing. It's a weird thing. The moment I see everyone wearing something I have, so it just triggers some little device in my brain that goes, "You've got to sell it."
I have yet to see anybody wearing this.
That one's beautiful.
Even though there's thousands of them out there.
That's good.
So that makes me happy.
That makes me happy though.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny though that I just like I collected Group B cars, and then I see everyone. Well, not everyone, but I see them a lot more now on Instagram. I see people buying them; they've become a big thing, and now part of me thinks I should get rid of them.
Right.
Because I don't want to just be have the same sausage as everyone else at the sausage party.
Right. I love that you call them sausage parties.
Because it is. How many times do you see a woman at a watch get together? Never.
Never.
I mean, and then it's so sad that they aren't women at watch parties.
So how did it happen though? You just got a good check and you knew that the Speedmaster was a good one. Like, what got you into watches? Like, what?
Well, the Speedmaster I got because I loved space.
Okay.
I don't know if you noticed the spacesuit when you came in.
I did.
It was very nice of you not to say anything.
I don't have one, but it's something I noticed.
Well, again, like the spacesuit. I wanted the spacesuit. I read. I was a massive science fiction nerd as a kid, and there was this Robert Heinlein book called "Have Spacesuit Will Travel" that I read when I was like 11. Then I wrote to NASA and said, "Do you have a spacesuit I could buy?" And they sent me like a bunch of brochures of like, "Thank you for your interest" and all that stuff. But I always wanted to get a spacesuit. And then in the 90s, when I was in advertising and the Soviet Union collapsed, God, I sound like I'm 5,000 years old.
No, just 4.
And this is pre-Google. I would Yahoo search spacesuit for sale, like obsessively.
No way.
And then I found a guy in Poland who knew a guy in Russia. And clearly this guy in Russia, that some space museum he had so much incredible stuff for sale, and I should have bought all of it, but I didn't have the foresight.
Right.
And he had a spacesuit.
So it's a Russian spacesuit?
It's a Russian cosmonaut suit that I bought. We negotiated for a year. I still have all the emails on my folder somewhere.
Brilliant.
And then I put money in an escrow account, and I paid $4,000 for it.
Well, because you can't buy them in the U.S., right? It's like buying any like certain
can't-
military watches and things like that.
Well,
like you can't.
buy. Well, NASA doesn't. Basically, at that point in the Russian history, everything was for sale, and then it showed up in a box, and I was just freaking out. And I first thing I did was try and put it on.
Were you successful?
Well, no, because it's for like a guy who's 5'2".
I was gonna ask, like, there's got to be a height disparity, right?
It's cheaper to send a small person into space because there's less mass, less fuel, lighter.
Wow, yeah.
So you think about that. So it makes more sense. But I got like half of it in, and I started sweating because it's rubber lined.
Oh wow. Well, back to the watches.
Yeah, sorry.
It's all good. I love this. I mean, it's a treat.
I'm a massive
right?
rambler.
Same.
I'm a huge rambler.
So your watch collection.
That's why I got the Speedmaster. That is why. That was the long explanation of the Speedmaster, because it went into space, and I thought, I can get this watch that went into space.
Right. But your collection sort of shapeshifts in a way.
It does
over time, which
Well,
I think is that evolving taste, or is it just always the contrarian? Too many people are buying what I have, so I got to go another direction.
Well, it's actually what's kind of amazing about watches, which you don't get with cars. With cars, it seems like there's a much smaller universe to explore in a way, but with watches, there are so many different pockets of forgotten horological history, and so I think that I've been collecting for 6 years or 5 or 6 years, and so I've just sort of burned through all these different kinds of watches in this quest for things that I really love. And then, like whether it's collecting or relationships, I think you have this sort of internal tuning fork inside of you, and when you see something you love, it kind of flicks that tuning fork and it makes the right sound.
Right.
If that's a weird metaphor, but that's how it works for me. So I'm just really curious, and also I'm both curious and I'm also driven. I'm really motivated by what people are not liking. So that Patek Philippe stuff from the 70s, most people don't like that stuff. And so that makes me think, oh, this is worth looking at.
Interesting. Is there like a subconscious thing knowing that it's a better value at that point?
Well,
or is it not even subconscious?
No, I don't look at it because I think it's a better value. I look at it because I'm interested that no one else likes them. Right. The fact that no one else is looking at those makes me interested in them. Right. And then I look at them and I look at them some more and I think, oh, you know what? The craftsmanship, they're beautiful. They're kind of, but you have to kind of get used to that aesthetic. Right. Because the thing about watch collecting, particularly on Instagram, is that there's such a gravitational pull for everyone to get the same thing. And so you become like, that's why everyone likes Rolex sport watches, because the more you see them, the more you like them. It's like advertising.
Yeah.
It's essentially advertising.
Right.
That's what Instagram's doing. And the more you like them, the more you like that aesthetic. So when you see something that's a different aesthetic, I don't like that, because you're not used to seeing it.
Well, it's so funny because I'm a pre-Daytona fan.
Yeah.
I love those pieces.
Me too.
So what draws you to them? The fact that they're not a Daytona?
Well, partly, yes. Well, actually, it's a two-part answer. One is from the start of collecting, I really loved Eberhardt watches.
Right.
I love that fussy design aesthetic. I just found that amazing. Mm-hmm. But then the more I looked at Rolex, like you say, I just thought, God, why everyone is just only talking about this stuff? What else is there? And I started looking at pre-Daytona, and it had that design aesthetic that I love, but it was also this paradoxical design aesthetic, because it was 40s design cues packaged in a kind of contemporary-ish case, steel case that we know. So it was that sandwich of conflicting emotions, which I really love. Just, it wasn't a Daytona or a Sub or a GM. I mean, I love those watches. They're really beautiful. And if no one else is buying them, I would be buying those watches.
Right. You recently designed a Rolex.
Yeah.
In a roundabout way.
Kind of, yes.
Can you talk about that so people know what we're talking about?
So I guess part of collecting for me is I'm so hung up on this idea that what you own should be a reflection of who you are.
Sure.
And it seems to me that what a lot of people own is a reflection of who everyone else is. And so the more I like collecting, the more I like the idea of making things that are specifically for me.
Right.
Designed by me, or have some input in how they look. And so I started looking at, I kept seeing on Instagram all these engraved Rolexes, and I started thinking about that. And I really admired the craftsmanship, but there was no idea to it.
Oh, you mean the ones where they've taken the bracelet
they
and
engraved
kind of
the
make
case
them
and the bracelet
like
and
paisley and
yeah,
whatever.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And they, the skulls or whatever. But there's no concept. It's just it's an aesthetic thing. Mm-hmm. And then I had this idea: what if I designed, or I had a dial engraved that was specific to the function of the watch. So a Submariner would get an underwater themed dial, Air King would get an aviation themed dial. So there's a reason for that dial to be engraved the way it is.
Sure.
And it would be a narrative on the dial, not just a pattern.
Right.
Because everything going back to Avatar, that's a solid advertising style idea. It's a concept.
It's on the nose too.
Yeah, it's an obvious idea.
Right.
But no one had done it. So then I spent 2 years trying to find an engraver, and then finally I found Johnny, who's King Nerd on Instagram, who's just amazing, and he got it totally. And then he designed. I had found this design I wanted, so we kind of went back and forth. We did the design, we did the engraving.
Now, did you hand draw it, or you
No,
actually...
I sent him scrap. I sent him. I was kind of fascinated with this whole Jules Verne, like giant octopus wrestling a diver, and I sent him images I found on the web and said something like this, and he came up with his sort of version of that.
Nice. Where's he based?
England, London.
Oh, so this was a long distance project.
Yeah, this is long. And then he sent me the dial, and I put it in the watch, and I thought, shit, it doesn't really work. I have to design the rest of the watch.
So what watches were you using? Modern, or was it a vintage?
It's a mid-90s Rolex.
Okay.
You want to see it?
So, yeah.
Do you have to pause it or something? Or?
No, I'm not pausing anything.
All right. I'm not pausing anything. Hang on. I mean, I'll show you the. Actually, I got a couple in today. This is the watch it's based on. This is the watch I'm going to be savaging.
So you've got Oh, you mean you got like a donor model today?
Yeah, that's what it starts as. It's a
a two-line modern, but still a steel bezel.
And then that's what it ends up as.
Holy smokes! And then you put it on a dark olive NATO.
Well, actually, I just put it on the NATO recently. It's on a. The thing that was interesting is once I got the dial back, I had to have custom brass dials made, right, for the project. So once I put the dial in the watch, I thought, okay, you know what? It doesn't work. I have to do a lot of other stuff to the watch to make it work. So I sandblasted the case. I sandblasted the bracelet. I skeletonized the hands, painted them black. I put a black diamond in the pip, and then I made a sterile.
Does the bezel rotate?
Yeah.
Okay.
which did. Yeah, and then I sandblasted the bezel.
You could almost use it as a GMT then.
You know what? Excellent selling proposition. I didn't even think of that.
You know what? Added value. That is super cool.
So we did them
in on Instagram, it like looks cool, but it looks so illustrated, and then in life, it's like so manufactured.
Right. It is.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's metal, obviously.
Yeah.
That's incredible. What did you say the dial was made of? Brass?
Brass. I had brass dials made.
And then you sandblasted the case yourself?
No. I there's a watchmaker I use, and I brought it to him. He sandblasted it.
Well, I'll take photos of this for sure.
All right, man.
Is that all right?
Yeah, no, of course. It was and then I decided to treat them like art. So basically, it's an edition of 6 of that design, and then we won't repeat that design again.
So 6.
Yeah.
Is that because of
no reason?
6.
Yeah, just 6.
Okay.
And so we sold 4 watches, which is pretty amazing. I'm shocked and delighted.
Right.
Say.
Right. What? Wow. What do they go for?
25 grand.
Okay.
Which is a lot of money. It costs a lot of money to make between, buying the watch, having the dials made, Johnny doing the engraving.
Same movement though.
Same movement. Yeah. I mean, the watches are delivered in a beautiful case or service and all the rest of it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool to look at a sub next to a sub and be
it's funny because I didn't know I was going to go that far.
Right.
I thought I was just going to drop the dial in and I was maybe going to skeletonize the hands and leave everything as is. But then when I dropped the dial in, I thought, oh, the bezel is so distracting.
I was going to say, I bet it looked weird.
It did. It didn't work. The bezel was super distracting and it just felt like it felt not cohesive as a piece of design. Right. And look, I've never designed a watch before. So, again, that's just the sort of arrogance of delusion, right?
The engraving's incredible, and it's like borderline 3-dimensional.
Oh, I mean,
I guess it technically is, but you know what I mean.
He's an incredibly talented artist.
Yeah, it's insane. Very cool. So you've just been ordering these by them. So you're making them as you can get.
Yeah, as the orders
donor
come in.
pieces.
Yeah, as the orders come in.
Okay.
So I just got 2 more this morning.
Getting back more towards like the car talk, Group B, you're a collector, and chronographs. Is the reason you like chronographs because of the automotive stuff?
No,
you just like
how they look.
Yeah,
but I also like. I mean, all the Patek 70 stuff is non-chronographical, if that's a word.
Right. So you were on talking watches very early on.
I was.
So you've only been collecting for 5 or 6 years. That was really early in your collecting days.
It was like a year into it.
Wow. And that came about how?
Well, I sold Ben Clymer a car, and then he kind of infected me with the watch collecting virus. Because, being a contrarian, I didn't collect watches in part because everyone who likes cars also likes watches. And I just found that really irritating. It was so formulaic. I was like, I'm not going to be one of those guys who, likes watches and cars. I'm just not going to do that. And then, I don't know why, but we became friends. And then I started just looking at watches. And next thing you know, I'm buying watches.
What was the car you sold him?
A 1961 Lancia Flaminia Sport Zagato.
Nice.
Yeah, it was really beautiful.
Does he still have it?
I think he sold it, actually.
Oh, did he? Okay. Yeah. Oh, it doesn't matter. What was your first car?
A 1984 VW Golf GTI.
Unreal.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a first car.
Well, it was, but I bought that car in 89, 88. So it was like an old car. It was just a used car.
Yeah, but still, a GTI is pretty specific.
I think I paid $4,000 for it. And then the muffler fell off and it sounded amazing. I thought, wow, this is so much better with the muffler, with no muffler.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. And then you have the Bastarda.
Bastarda, yeah.
Which I'm turning into that car. So let's talk about where it came from, how it evolved, because it's pretty famous at this point.
So this
Wouldn't you say?
I guess weirdly,
You made
yes.
keychains for it.
Yeah, I sold them all.
Right.
I know, which is super weird. So I bought this. I had a Lancia Evo 1, and I sold it. Actually, I was going to list it on Bring a Trailer, and then Randy, the guy who owns Bring a Trailer, said, "Do you want to sell it to me?" And then we had this like very vigorous haggleathon for about a week. He's a strong haggler, and I sold it to him. And then afterwards, I kept seeing, that guy Automobili Amos Eugenio, who's done the Futurista.
Right.
So I kept seeing his car, and then I kept thinking, shit, I wish I still had one of those cars. And I mentioned in passing to my friend Tom, who's a car dealer in England, I said, look, if you ever find a super cheap one, just let me know. And I sort of mentioned it in a way that you kind of say it, but nothing's going to happen.
Right.
And you kind of hope nothing's going to happen. But then he called me 2 days later and said, I've got this one for super cheap, and it's in Japan. Do you want it? And I said, oh, I guess so. I guess so.
So did you, like for anybody collecting watches, if you buy like a really old watch, you want to know if it's been serviced or not. So like, was there anything necessary for the car?
Well, I thought not.
Okay, yeah. See, this is where I'm going.
I thought not. Because buying cars in Japan actually is a pretty amazing process. Like they have a very rigorous inspection thing.
Japanese.
And they come with graded and all that stuff. So the interior was amazing. The car looked straight and solid. So the car gets here. I pick it up at the port. And then I take it to my mechanic. And he goes, oh, it's a super solid car, no leaks, nothing. I've never seen one so solid. And he does a compression test, leak down test. He goes, actually, it turns out we may have to rebuild the engine.
No way.
But that was okay because I was going to do something like that anyway because I got it for so cheap. I wanted to make it into a hooligan car.
Right.
Because it came festooned like barnacles with all these bloody gauges, and it had this like spongy knee pad on the armrest for high G lateral turns. Like whoever was driving it had raced it.
Yeah.
And I loved all that stuff. And that's why I started calling it the Bastarda, because it was originally red, then had been painted white. Then I not painted it, but color changed it.
Now, is it a wrap that's on it?
No, it's a thing called Autoflex, which is this spray.
Yep.
And it looks just like paint. It's
Yeah.
amazing. And it's super cheap, so I was sort of doing everything on the cheap. So he rebuilt the engine. And then it kept kind of screwing me over. It kept breaking. Like I got it back with the rebuilt engine. I was driving around the city, and then I lost all brakes. So I had to do these like handbrake.
So you're drifting around corners at this point?
I'm drifting. Oh yeah, it's like Tokyo Drift, but with an old geezer who can't drift. And then I'm handbraking it at the stop sign till I get back to the garage.
That's hilarious.
So it kept breaking, and I kept fixing it. So I called it the Bastarda because I don't know. It just seemed. I liked it. I liked the idea of rebranding the car, and also I had painted a color no one had ever seen that car in before.
Right.
Which was interesting. I just thought I can make it my own.
Right.
Like the watch. I just thought, let me make it, because the thing about old cars, you treat them with reverence. You don't want to touch them. But this car had already been fondled briskly. Right. So I thought, why not continue the fondling?
Have you made any additional modifications?
Just
like performance-wise?
Yeah, well, I mean, I rebuilt the engine to higher spec. Chipped
right.
it.
Wheels?
Wheels.
Yeah.
I straight piped it initially, but it was too hooligan even for me. So I added a small.
You hear you 4 blocks away.
Yeah, basically. And then I thought, you know what? I'm going to call the car Bastarda. I'm going to have signage made in the same typography as Lancia Integrale. My friend Steve, who did the dials, he makes everything. He made those for me.
Right.
And then I made keychains. And now I'm actually going to make a clothing brand.
Really?
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah. And the brand is called Viva Bastardo.
Brilliant.
And we're going to have Bastardo sweatshirts, which are in this beautiful calligraphic script that comes from a very early Lancia, like 1930s script. We've designed the logo, everything. So it's all happening. So I'm going to make a little clothing brand out of Bastardo.
Well, we'll talk clothing after this.
Okay.
Because, I'm dying to know where you're getting your T-shirts.
I haven't even started.
Oh, you haven't?
Just the design has started.
Well, if you need help, which you probably already do. I'm
happy to hear to listen, man. Yeah. The sweatshirts is a guy in Pennsylvania who's connected to my designer.
Gotcha.
Because I'm having the Bastardo embroidered on the sweatshirt. I want to have it. I don't want to have it like a silk screen. So the car's kind of generated a brand.
That's amazing.
Which is interesting to me.
Where were the keychains made? Locally? Or do you have to go overseas for that?
Well, it was a place in the States, but they went to China.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah.
What? Let's talk Giugiaro.
Giugiaro. Oh, you said it really well, man.
You have an M1 BMW.
I do.
In the collection.
Yeah.
What
the
is
collection. That sounds posh, man. It sounds like there's a guy who takes care of the collection.
2 claps.
The bell.
How did you come about that car? I know the story, but others don't, and I love the story.
So I had some really beautiful 60s Italian cars. I had a 246 Dino. I had the Flaminia Sport Zagato. I had an Iso Grifo. I had all these really beautiful things. And I went down to Florida to see this guy who was selling a Mangusta, the Tommaso Mangusta, which is a really beautiful car. Is that Giugiaro?
Yeah.
It is, yeah. Silver 4-headlight car. It was 80 grand.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, then whatever, 250. And I went down and I got in the car and I must have driven it like 100 yards. And it was the most hilarious drive position I've ever experienced. You basically, the tip of my forehead is touching where the glass meets the roof in the car. I mean, it was just so ridiculous. I just started laughing immediately. And I got out of the car and said, I can't buy this car. But he had
no airbag would even bother helping you at this point. Your head's just through the glass.
I'll just impale myself on the steering wheel before I hit anyone, just to get out of the way. But he had an M1 in the showroom. And I had never been that interested in them, but I thought, you know what? I'm here. Why not have a go? I mean, how often do you get to have a go in a vintage car, before you even consider it?
Right.
And I drove it, and it just blew my mind. I mean, I was fizzing. I was like I don't know what I was like, but my head exploded. And I had this kind of epiphany. That's the closest I've come to a religious epiphany. I thought, you know what? I don't want to have any of this stuff anymore from the 60s. It's all bollocks. I want to have stuff that really drives well. And he also actually had a Stratos there. So I tried to buy the M1 from him. It didn't happen. And I ended up buying it from a guy who was a gun dealer in Atlanta. And he'd had the car for 10 years, loved the car more than life itself. He had the jacket, he had the brochures, he had like a glass case full of like little M1s. And he was selling because his girlfriend wanted them to buy a log cabin. So I go down there, I buy the car. I'm almost like, I feel bad, but not that bad, but pretty bad about taking away from him.
Yeah, you're taking away his manhood.
Yeah, basically his whole, yeah. And he said, please, if you ever want to sell it, just, let me know first and all this stuff. He called me like a year later and he said, how's the car? And I said, it's pretty good. I said, how's the girlfriend? He said, well, we kind of broke up after I sold the M1. And I thought,
oh my gosh.
So anyway, that I just kind of got obsessed with the idea of functionality in cars.
Right.
So the M1 was designed for a race series. All the Group B stuff was designed for a reason. It wasn't designed for posing. It was designed for a purpose. And I found that really romantic.
So this was your foray into that.
That was the entrance into that. And I sold all my 60s stuff, bought all ugly, boxy stuff from the 80s.
So other than driver position, what was the driving distinction there? Because I've never driven either.
For what?
The De Tomaso versus the M1.
It was just, the M1, it just gave you, like, the thing about 60s cars for the most part is they always felt like, I don't know, like they didn't give you, I never felt like they gave me confidence. I'm not the most amazing driver. But when I got in the M1, I felt like, holy shit, I am an amazing driver in this car. Because the chassis so balanced, the engine sounded incredible. It had acceleration. It had just the right amount of horsepower. It just felt great driving it. Like the other stuff, I mean, I loved driving the Dino, actually. That was an amazing car to drive.
Right.
But I don't know, like it just made me feel good in a way that those cars didn't for some reason.
Now, the shift gate pattern in the M1's interesting, isn't it?
It's just a dog leg.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, all the race car stuff is always dog leg.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't driven one.
You don't want to downshift into first when you're racing a car.
Right.
Could be
a
awkward.
lot of like modern Ferraris, even for the longest time, have like started, and so you have to downshift into first to start.
Yeah,
because they'll start in second.
Yeah, well, that's the dogleg pattern.
Yeah. Interesting. But you're also into the Seiko quartz. Giugiaro.
That's the one watch I still have from my Talking Watches episode.
Right. The only one.
The only one.
So bye-bye Breitling.
Everything. I was massively into Breitling, sold all my Breitling.
Now, was Breitling the English thing, or was Breitling just an
No,
aesthetic thing?
You know what it was? Here's another example of me being a contrarian. Everyone was massively into Hoya, and Hoya was going mental. And I kept looking at Breitling going, but Breitling's so much more interesting just from a pure design standpoint and an innovation standpoint. Like, they had so many interesting, fascinating watches that just, they were doing stuff that other people weren't doing, and they were taking design leaps that certainly Hoya wasn't doing. Hoyas are cool, but they were
Well, Hoyer's
like,
so minimal.
Well,
whereas
they
like
kind of-
Breitling
they-
can be really busy on the dial.
Well, I felt like Hoya was like committee cool. Like a bunch of people sat around and said, this, we'll design it this way. And it was beautiful design, but Breitling there's particularly some of the Super Oceans, they were doing stuff that no one was doing design-wise at all.
Right.
And I really admired that. And I loved that.
I saw that Analog Shift was selling a Super Ocean the other day, and I thought of you. I was like,
They're so cool.
I was like,
Super
is
Oceans.
that Phil's watch?
I mean, I
could have been.
sold all of them, but I sold all of them because I started seeing everyone getting into Breitlings, and I thought, okay, that's enough for me.
So even though you...
Giugiaro.
Yeah.
Back to that.
Yeah, back to Giugiaro. What's interesting is like, obviously, if it comes from the same head, right? Like, the design aesthetic may or may not be the same.
Right.
Do you ever find that your work changes because it's too similar to what you've done before?
Well,
Aesthetically, like photographs,
for sure.
right? You could, it's the same point of view.
No, actually, the one thing I think that distinguishes my work is that each project is visually really different from the previous. Right. They all look really different. Because the thing I feel very strongly is that ideas are they're kind of like living creatures. And when you have an idea, if you listen to it, it will tell you what it wants to be. So for art, it'll tell me if it wants to be video or sculpture or installation or whatever it happens to be.
Right. Well, has your car collection morphed the same way that your watch collection has?
Well, it's a little harder to turn around cars because
Right, sure, yeah.
they're sort of a lot less fungible, I guess. But I feel actually like I'm on the cusp of that change now.
Well, you're creating a clothing line behind one, so
well, there is that. But I've been thinking about this for a while, of just selling all my cars and keeping the Bastarda, and then buying, like, I've got my eye on I quite fancy a Ford Escort Cosworth.
Oh wow!
RS from the early 90s. Just maybe, I don't know. Like,
so you like kind of the hatchback?
Well, I like
style.
hooligan
Right.
style. But also, the funny thing about Instagram is it really begins to define you. Mm-hmm. Like you become, you're the guy who has all those Group B cars.
Right.
It becomes part of who you are, which is strange.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's sort of the caveat of making Instagram personal versus a professional outlet.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. I'm not that famous, so I don't really get, like, you're that guy who blah, blah, blah.
But, I guess I'm not, I don't think I'm famous either, but I do get, but people go, when people go, how's the 037? I say, I sold it. They go, what? You sold it? Like, it's almost like what it must be like if you're 17 and you break up with a girlfriend, but then you always you see her in the background picture of some post on Instagram. Like, there's always the shadow of things you used to own,
right?
Because of Instagram. Whereas in pre-Instagram era, you just sold something and disappeared, and that was it.
See, I'm the weird guy that thinks for borderline years before buying something, especially
really?
like a watch, and a lot of that has to do with affordability.
Sure.
And for me, it's like I keep looking at it until I either get sick of it or I can't stop thinking about it.
I'm the same way, but on a much shorter timeline. Like, I'll look at things repeatedly. And actually, funnily enough, when I'm thinking about a watch, I look at it on Instagram. There's two things that happen. I look at it on Instagram to see, and I will notice. It's not. I don't do this on purpose, but I will notice how many posts there are of that watch. And if there's less than 100, I think, that's interesting.
Suddenly it's interesting.
But also, the other reason is I like to see what it looks like on people's wrists.
Right. We were talking earlier about so it's funny. I wore a watch home to North Carolina where I grew up, and my dad had, since seeing him, bought a watch, and we traded for the 3 or 4 days that I was home.
Right.
And so I wore it all day, every day for 4 days. He wore it all day, every day for 4 days. And at the end of the trip, we traded back, And my idea, actually, the day I was leaving, I was like, well, let's just keep the trade and I'll just give it back to you the next time I see you.
Right.
Right? That was the idea anyway. And then he's like, no, let's trade back. And I said, fine.
What were the watches?
And so I put the watch on and I'm about to get out of the car. And he goes, by the way, the next time you come home, I want to trade back. I was like, you saw it on my wrist now. You want it back.
That's right.
And that's how it works.
I have.
We're all 4-year-olds.
No, it's so true.
You know what I mean?
I mean, I love people. I love friends of mine driving my cars.
Yeah.
Because then because when they get out, I see what they look like and I think, that's how I feel.
Yes.
Hopefully. And I feel exactly the same about watches.
Yeah.
It's really cool when someone puts on a watch I own. It's it's so weird how fascinating it is.
Right.
Because when they're wearing it, you see everything you love about that watch.
Right.
Or not.
Right. The watches, to answer your question, it was I had a Batman GMT,
Right.
but on Oyster, not the new, on Jubilee. And then he had the previous iteration Explorer 2 white dial.
Oh, that's cool.
So the 40 millimeter with the red GMTN, my favorite Explorer 2, the only Explorer 2 as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, maybe we'll switch back or whatever.
Right.
But and I always keep the GMT hand on East Coast time because of my dad, and you know he lives there, and I live on the West Coast. But yeah, I read somewhere recently there's a new Porsche project you're working on. Is that
yes?
Okay.
So going back to my obsession with the idea of ideas, so I kept looking at Porsches and I kept seeing it's kind of like, you know what the thing about the Rolex I did is I just got sick of seeing like the zombie PVD hordes of blacked out Rolexes. I thought I want to do my own thing. And the thing with the Porsches is I kept looking at everyone doing an homage to IROC, RS, RSR, like everything, tartan interior, like everything is just this copy of this car that existed in the 70s or the 60s, long hood, whatever it was, right?
Cool by committee.
Yeah, well, I mean, cool by gravitational pull,
Right.
in a way. Like everyone's doing it, so everyone does it.
Right.
And again, it's not that those cars aren't beautiful. It's just that if you're going to customize a car, why would you do it so it looks like everyone else's customized car? So I had this notion that I would design a car called the 212, which is the New York City area code. Right. And it's a poem to New York. So I'm trying to take as many influences as I can from the city. So for instance, the wheels are copies of manhole covers.
No way?
Yeah.
So you're having those manufactured?
Yeah.
I can't wait to see this.
And the engine grill is a copy of the subway grate pattern.
Wow.
And
so what body are you using for this
it's
car?
a 78 SC.
Okay, so
and then the gauges.
Is that accordion bumper?
Yeah, but also, well, there's two things. Because I'm such a delusional and presumptuous bastard, not only am I just saying I'm going to do this car that's specific to a car designed around New York City and for New York City, but I'm also changing all the things I dislike about Porsche design. Because, of course, I've got years as an automotive designer.
Right, of course. That's what you majored in, right?
Yeah. I mean, English lit and then car design. So, for instance, I never liked the rear end treatment of Porsches, the way the lights are. So we redesigned the whole back end. I never liked the door handles. So I have a whole other door handle setup. I never liked the weird way the gas cap, the lid flips up. I just found that weird, so I just got rid of that and did something else.
So what don't you like about the door handles?
I don't know.
Like the trigger thing? Or?
I just found it like... What I'm doing actually is I'm kind of just smoothing out the whole car, getting rid of all this extraneous stuff, kind of making it... I don't know, I just felt like they were... Like the shape is so beautiful, but then that sort of felt... what's the word? Like it felt like misplaced punctuation.
Okay. So it's just got too many commas.
The way it was a period in the wrong place.
Right.
Like just the way it was designed didn't quite feel as good as the rest of the car.
Right.
Which, why would it be? It's a functional thing that they just put on there that's probably the easiest and best possible solution. But I thought I had another idea for the door handles.
That's brilliant. Well, I saw, because of Instagram, obviously, I see certain things that you're into. Sure. I saw that you spent some time with Magnus Walker recently.
Yes.
So
we became friends.
So he's in on this.
Well, he's seen it. Yeah, he's seen it.
Oh, so there's like a physical manifestation already.
Oh, yeah, it's all in the
When
works.
did you start it?
God, like a year and a half ago.
Oh,
2
no
years,
way.
Maybe
Okay,
2 years
so
ago.
yeah,
2
all right.
years.
And
It's just-
when will it be done?
You'll have to ask Rich, the guy at Rox Auto, who's doing it. It's a very slow project.
Are you doing any engine or performance stuff?
No.
Okay, so it's all aesthetic.
The engine, it's a strict 3 liter, which he rebuilt. So there's no miles on a rebuilt engine.
Right.
Yeah, it's just totally aesthetic.
Cool.
And I'm redoing the interior completely differently from how it would look normally.
Well, what did Magnus think?
Well, you know what? It's hard to tell sometimes with Magnus because he's polite. I think he likes it. I mean, he likes the details. He likes the changes I've made. So, but we'll
Because
see.
he changes his cars and
Yeah.
he manipulates, but
For sure.
But
But
very
this
classic,
is-
but racy.
Yeah,
And
this is quite. I mean, this is going to be a very binary car. I think there's going to be a lot of very upset people.
I mean, I think those are the best objects.
Well, I think so. Look, you don't move the conversation forward unless you're upsetting people. Because if you're upsetting people, you're saying something new.
Right.
And that's generally what people get upset about.
Right.
Is they're kind of knocked off balance by something new. Right.
I just can't wait for BBS to come out with their manhole cover wheels.
I'm telling you, you know what's amazing? You want me to show them to you?
100%.
Okay. I'll show them to you because it's radio.
Well, yeah, exactly. So what's interesting too is like if you look at a lot of the new, was the E-Race series? What is it called? Like the F1 series, but for electric cars.
Okay, so here's the cover. Here's the
Right.
inspiration, right? That's the manhole cover. So, and this is a rendering, but there's the wheel.
Yeah, I'll delete all this out.
No, you could keep it in there.
Oh,
For your reaction.
Yeah.
No one's going to know what it looks like.
well, it's so funny. It's like this sunflower
But
meets like a 100-spoke wheel.
But it's beautiful. I
It
think.
really is.
I mean, it's this really beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And it's also...
Are those going to be for sale?
I mean, I don't know.
Somebody's going to buy those.
Well, maybe. That's the thing. I'm making a car that I'll never be able to sell. Unless it becomes like such a famous car that
well, I'm sure
who
it
knows?
will be. I mean,
But
even just as an art project, I mean, it inherently becomes a one of one.
this
right?
is you can't say what this is, but that's the door handle.
It looks like a futuristic historic CD player.
That's actually from the 50s, that door handle.
Yeah. That's incredible. Well, this has been a ton of fun.
Thank you so much, man. It's been
What-
really entertaining.
What has been the best way for others to keep up with you? Like any way to
I
follow
guess
your work?
just Mr. Enthusiast.
Okay. So
Yeah.
Instagram, Mr. Enthusiast.
Yeah.
For all the shenanigans.
That's for all the shenanigans.
I love
of
it.
which there are many.
Yeah. Well, we wouldn't have it any other way. Phil, I really appreciate the time.
Thank you so much, man. I
Okay.
really, it's been a lot of fun.
Cool. All right. Cheers. Major thanks goes to Phil for having me over at his apartment for what was one heck of a time chatting. As always, thank you to Clear Audio for the use of their incredible headphones and to Jensen Reed and Super Beautiful for the theme track. Stay tuned for the next episode dropping in 2 weeks' time. Stay safe, healthy, and happy. Bye, everyone.